Hey everybody, this is part 2 Mulligan guide. In the previous video we covered the early game. So when you don't play Teemo or Zoe turn 1, now we're gonna be talking about mid game and late game passing. So this is where the really cool stuff is happening. Depends what deck archetype you are playing, but we're gonna cover mostly now the mid range and combo decks. The mid game starts basically at turn 5. So basically the mid range and combo decks, you want to establish a board where on turn 5 you want to force, like you want to have already a superior board than your opponent and you force them first to act. Great example of such actions is basically Draven's deck, because this deck can develop a decent board by turn 5, and then turn 5 you can start passing into opponent having already a decent combat tricks like Tri-Beam, Static Shock into a Flock, or like you can be having a Sentry into the Flock and into Powerful Swing. Opponent has to be thinking about a lot of stuff, especially when you have attack token on 5, yeah? So what happens on turn 5? Alright, let's say at turn 5, like you are open attacking into your opponent, and like let's say you are attacking with the Draven.
You're gonna need a doctor.
Opponent at this point has to make a call, like if you are playing against the Masha deck, if you are playing against a Freeze deck, like if they want to commit a combat trick or not to remove your unit, or because your attack is superior to their blockers and they can't really block efficiently. So now they either take damage, they lose value, they lose tempo, or they lose HP on the Nexus. Usually the correct play by opponent is using HP as a resource in this spot if they have a way to heal back or prevent future damage. Because to not allow you to use combat tricks to your advantage at this spot, right? Whoever, usually in the lore, whoever uses the first combat trick is in the disadvantage spot, because you can play a stack on the spell and react to your opponent, and you're gonna get more value because he used the mana, he used the card, which effectively might not even have a value, because let's say they use single combat on a unit that has 2 HP and you're gonna Mystic Shot that unit. So they lost 2 mana, they lost a card, and they had no basically effect. Yeah, and you killed the unit with the Mystic Shot you would have killed anyway. Because let's say, what happens if you use Mystic Shot first on that unit, then you use a card and they would respond with a single combat, then it costs you a card, it doesn't get any effect, and you are losing a unit of your own because he's going to use single combat on your unit. This has some exceptions when you want to bait out opponent's removal. Let's say you want to develop Ezreal, which will be finishing a game in a turn or two, and you want to see if your opponent, like you are losing, let's say, Mystic Shot on the opponent's lifesteal unit. You are checking if he has basically single combat, and then if he doesn't have it, if he doesn't use it, either he's a good player and he realizes that he can't really use it in this matchup because he needs to keep it for the threats like Ezreal, or he uses it, and then you are safer to play Ezreal as your win con. So this has some exceptions, but most of the time try to avoid playing combat trick first. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Open passing. When do you want to open to pass? When you are on attack token. So basically, let's say if you are going into turn 5 without any mana banked. Let's say 5 mana, 0 banked mana against opponent with 8 mana total, 3 banked and 5 unit mana. Then open passing is a perfect strategy, because usually, not always, but usually depends on the matchup, etc. But 80% of the time, the correct place is just to open pass. Because, like, if they are not playing some sort of control deck, let's say Lissandra Tyrande in the current meta. In this spot, what happens? If you open pass and they pass back, then they are losing 5 mana. You are losing only 2 mana because the 5 mana you had going to the spell mana. So it's already a great spot for you. Yeah, you are going, like, you are having already superior board, and you are getting more mana, so you are gaining tempo by doing so. And then opponent will have harder time to catch up. And if your opponent, so now, it depends on your opponent's hand. They either need to play a cheap card, like, let's say, Entreat, draws them champion, and they go down to 6 mana. And now at this point you could be thinking, they are losing only 1 mana, more than you do. It might be worth to react. It depends on the matchup, etc. But usually in this spot, opponent will be forced to play a unit. And what happens when they play a unit, you can take advantage of that with your combat trick, or you can attack without opponent having a way to respond to you. Because let's say when you are attacking into opponent's one unit, let's say the unit will be Shyvana on the board, and they have 8 mana, and you open attacking that, you are walking into like so many combat leaks, like Judgment, Sharp Sight plus Concerted, Sharp Sight plus Single Combat, and you have only 5 mana. You can play usually one spell here, and the opponent can play from 1 to 3 spells even. So it's better to open pass in this spot and see what opponent does. Like let's say play stay Screeching, and suddenly what you can do, you can bluff Beam in this spot if you are for example playing the Drave NS, and you can collect the value with the with the Beam, yeah, on the Screeching or Shyvana. Yeah, they can answer this with like a single combat, but that's still 2-for-2 trade in the matchup, so it's not the worst. And they like you force them to have it in this specific spot, like Screeching plus single combat. And if they pass back, again, you are getting a tempo, which is completely fine. Alright, moving on to the next point. When it's worth to attack for value, let's say challenge opponent's unit, or use removal for opponent's unit, and when it's worth to go for the lethal. Like, you have to basically do the math. Like, you have to, first of all, know opponent's deck to do that. Do the math, how often you're gonna automatically lose the game if you're gonna go for lethal, if opponent has certain amount of the answers. Let's say if they can have only like, let's say if they're only out to survive lethal is like Star Shaping, and if you go for lethal in the specific spot and it loses you game on the spot, it's usually worth to just go for the value and go keep up the tempo on the board, then threatening the lethal this specific turn and just holding on for next attack token. I usually do that unless I know that I have like having a read on opponent's hand, etc., helping those spots, or like amount of the cards they have in the hand. But usually try to push for like when you are learning, etc., try to push for lethal when opponent has when can have only like 3 cards in their deck can be an answer to your to that. And if like it's at like let's say it's at least 5-6, I would hold back and usually go for the tempo play if you can. If you know that basically if you don't kill them this turn, you have to realize you're gonna lose the game. It's always worth to go for lethal, even if they can have like 9 cards to prevent that lethal. You have to like ask yourself, can I win after this turn against them? Is there a way to win this game if I don't go for lethal right now? If the answer is yes, okay, how often you gonna win if opponent has the answer? And how often you're gonna lose if you don't? So this is very important, and like basically asking yourself a questions and just paying attention to opponent's hand, which cards he plays from the hand is crucial for this, because you're gonna notice people like when opponent is holding on like 2 cards that are on far left entire game, you can have a read that like basically against like one deck it could be Judgment, against other deck it could be Star Shaping, against other deck it could be like Get Excited. You can have a read, which will help you make a decision if you want to go for lethal or go for the tempo play. Also, open passing against, like instead of attacking, open passing against control decks is kinda important, because you force them out of the mana and tempo if you have a good tempo play for next turn, because they have to play removal. And if they pass back, then you can, again, they can't open pass next turn into you, because you have already a really good board attacking into them next turn. Make sure when you're open passing, your board is resilient to AoE. Because if you open pass, then opponent can keep passing back, because they can have 1 card that removes your entire board on the fast speed. Let's say Whale, if you're or Whale plus Ice Shard, if you have like just 1 and 2 HP units. So if you are playing like let's say a Swarm deck, or make sure your board is at a decent pace against AoE removal when you are open passing into opponent. So when you to plan out the attack into the next attack token, basically. So let's say if you are open passing turn 5, you are preparing your attack for turn 7. Yeah, covering. So this is like the mid-game strategy in terms of passing. Like this is brief. Like I'll be doing the more specific passing guide at every deck guide I'll be doing. So this is just general tips you should be paying attention to. And in terms of late game passing, Late game, usually, if it gets to late game, it's usually just for the value or bluff, and it comes down a lot to the bluffs. Like, you have to pay attention if you're playing against like a side deck, if they are running Atrocity, so playing around Atrocity. Bluffing Atrocity if you are playing yourself a side deck is very important. Playing around stuff like Rite of Negation, forcing now opponents' mana to, so you can actually go for lethal, because they might have that Rite of Negation. Like, there is a lot of nuances that you're gonna learn by just playing them out. But basically, late game, make sure you utilize pass as often as you can to get value. Because late game is not about tempo usually, it's about the value. Yeah. Alright, guys. Good luck on utilizing the tips.